Two movements separated by thousands of miles are independently resurrecting the exact vision that got Muammar Gaddafi killed in 2011. And if they ever link up, the West's control over African resources ends permanently. This is the story of how Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso is executing Gaddafi's playbook step by step, why Saif al-Islam Gaddafi remains Libya's most popular political figure 14 years after his father's death, and what happens when the Pan-African dream that died in Tripoli gets reborn in the Sahel with an army behind it. Let me show you exactly why Western powers are more terrified of this ideological resurrection than any military threat. Because what's emerging isn't just nationalism, it's a coordinated challenge to the entire system that's kept Africa poor for centuries. To understand why this moment is so dangerous for Western interests, you need to understand what was actually lost in 2011. And it wasn't just one leader, it was an entire vision for continental sovereignty that had been building for decades. Libya before NATO intervention in 2011 had the highest standard of living in Africa. Free electricity, fuel that cost pennies per liter, $50,000 government grants for newlyweds to buy homes, free education, free healthcare with medical treatment abroad fully funded if Libyan hospitals couldn't provide it. Zero external debt to the IMF or World Bank, the great man-made river bringing water to the desert, and 143 tons of gold reserves designated for backing a Pan-African currency. Omar, a 55-year-old taxi driver in Tripoli today, remembers when he was an electrical engineer who never worried about power bills. He remembers Fridays at the beach without staring at the gas gauge in panic. He remembers a country that belonged to its people, but after Operation Unified Protector in 2011, he watched NATO jets bomb the great man-made river, destroying water infrastructure while claiming humanitarian intervention. Today, Omar waits 3 days just to withdraw cash from his own bank account. Electricity cuts out for 12 hours daily in a country sitting on Africa's largest oil reserves, militias control streets that were once safe, and the darkest reality, open-air slave markets operate in 21st century Libya under the eyes of the civilized world that intervened to save it. The intervention killed a leader but murdered a nation. It replaced flawed stability with perfect chaos. And for what? Was it truly about human rights, or was it about the 143 tons of gold in Gaddafi's plan to stop selling oil in US dollars? But memory is dangerous for conquerors. You can bomb ministries and kill leaders, but you cannot bomb memory. Every time lights go out in Tripoli, people remember when they stayed on. Every time militias demand bribes, people remember when streets were safe. And that collective memory is the soil where Gaddafi's vision is taking root again. Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, Muammar's son, was captured by revolutionary militias in 2011. The International Criminal Court wanted him, militias wanted him executed. He was held by the Zintan Brigade, sentenced to death. But then something remarkable happened. His captors eventually released him and became his protectors. Why would revolutionaries who fought against his father protect him? Because over the years, as they watched Libya turn into a playground for foreign proxies and terrorists, they realized the monster they were guarding was the only man who knew how to run the state. They realized the revolution had been a scam. Saif al-Islam is now Libya's most popular political figure. Polls consistently show if free elections happened tomorrow, he would win by landslide. And that's exactly why the West and UN have delayed elections repeatedly. They talk about democracy, but they're terrified of the democratic result because a vote for Saif is a vote to kick them out. The Libyan tribal structure never swore loyalty to post-Gaddafi governments. The Warfala, the Gaddafi, the Magorha, these ancient networks went quiet. After 2011, they waited, and now tribal councils are shifting. Elders are speaking again. They see Saif not as return to dictatorship, but as return to order and dignity. This is soft power that no amount of Western money can buy. You can purchase politicians in Tripoli, but you cannot purchase loyalty of desert tribes. The Gaddafi family has deep roots in these sands, while current governments are seen as tourists with foreign passports ready to flee to London or Paris when things get tough. But a unified Libya alone is manageable for Western powers. What truly terrifies them is what's happening 2,000 kilometers south in the Sahel. Because there's a young captain who grew up idolizing Muammar Gaddafi, and he's executing the exact same playbook. Captain Ibrahim Traoré doesn't look like typical politicians. He wears combat fatigues and a red beret, he sleeps on thin mattresses beside his soldiers on front lines, and at 36 years old he leads Burkina Faso with the kind of revolutionary fervor the West hoped died with Thomas Sankara in 1987. Western media calls him a coup leader and dictator. But on Ouagadougou streets they call him IB. They call him the reincarnation of Thomas Sankara, and most dangerously for Western interests, they're calling him the young Gaddafi. For decades, the script in Francophone Africa was simple. French military stays, French companies extract gold and uranium, local leaders get villas in Paris while their people starve. It was modern colonialism, polite on surface but brutal underneath, and Traoré looked at this arrangement and said no more. In a move that shocked the Élysée Palace, Traoré ordered French military out of Burkina Faso. A 36-year-old captain leading one of Earth's poorest nations looked a nuclear-armed superpower in the eye and told them to pack their bags. He gave them 1 month and they left. But he didn't stop there. He expelled the French ambassador, banned French media outlets spreading propaganda. He turned off the tap of influence, and when asked why, he quoted the philosophy Gaddafi preached 40 years ago. The slave who is not able to assume his rebellion does not deserve to be pitied. He's not asking for aid, he's demanding respect. Traoré is hitting the West where it hurts most. Resources: Burkina Faso is rich in gold, but for years that gold flowed out through foreign mining contracts, leaving pennies for locals. Traoré has begun revising mining codes, nationalizing mine security, taking back the gold. This is exactly what Gaddafi did in 1969 when he kicked out British and American bases and nationalized oil. The parallels are impossible to ignore. Traoré is operating from Gaddafi's playbook, driven by the same ideological engine. He grew up hearing stories of Gaddafi's defiance, and now he's living it. But Traoré knows bravery alone isn't enough. He knows Thomas Sankara was assassinated because he was isolated. He knows Gaddafi was killed because he fought alone against coalitions. This is why Traoré forged the alliance of Sahel states with Mali and Niger. It's essentially an African defense pact. If you attack one, you attack all three. If France tries retaking Niger's uranium, they fight Burkina Faso's army too. This alliance has terrified Western strategists because they're watching a solid block of territory larger than the European Union detach from their sphere of influence. Traoré represents the muscle of this new movement. He has the army, the revolutionary zeal, the youth of Africa, where 60% of the continent is under 25, and they worship him. To them, he's the avenger punching back after decades of bullying. However, Traoré has a strategic weakness. Burkina Faso and the entire Sahel alliance are landlocked. They have gold, uranium, cotton, fighters, but they don't have ports. They're surrounded by coastal countries still under Western pressure to blockade them. To truly break free and build an independent economy that survives sanctions, the Sahel needs a gateway to the ocean. They need a partner with ports, refineries, and deep pockets to fund infrastructure projects the IMF refuses to touch. They need Libya. Traoré looks north and sees the missing piece. He sees the gateway to the Mediterranean. If the Sahel's revolutionary spirit links with Libya's resources, the encirclement breaks. The young Gaddafi of the south needs the sons of Gaddafi in the north. It's a marriage of necessity forged in survival's fire. Look at an Africa map and draw a line from Tripoli on the Mediterranean down to Ouagadougou in the Sahel. You don't just see a trade route, you see a lifeline that for decades Western strategy has obsessed over keeping broken. They wanted North Africa separated from sub-Saharan Africa. They invented terms like MENA to psychologically detach Libya from southern brothers. Why? Because if that line connects, the colonial model dies, and here's what that connection could look like. The energy equation where Libyan oil flows south instead of to Europe. Cheap Libyan fuel power Sahel generators, production costs drop, economies explode. No more begging the World Bank for loans to buy fuel. They trade gold for oil directly, bypassing US dollars entirely. The logistics of sovereignty where Libya's Mediterranean coastline offers the landlocked Sahel a gateway outside Western control. Imagine a railway from Ouagadougou to Benghazi. Suddenly Niger's uranium doesn't have to go to France. It goes to Libyan ports and sells to highest bidders: Russia, China, India. The monopoly breaks, the hostage situation ends. The military fusion where Libya has hardware but lacks unified disciplined forces, while the Sahel has battle-hardened ideological armies. The Sahel provides the shield, the manpower, the infantry securing Libyan oil fields from Western proxies. Libya provides the spear, the funding, the fuel, the air cover. It's perfect symbiosis. This isn't a new idea. This is exactly what Muammar Gaddafi was building before they killed him. He constructed trans-Saharan highways, built communication satellites, funded the African Central Bank. He understood unity was the only survival path. And what Traoré and the Gaddafi family represent is blowing dust off those old blueprints. But this time, there's a difference. This time they're desperate, they know there's no going back. And that desperation makes them dangerous in ways that 2011 Gaddafi never was. Think about panic this causes in Europe. Europe lost cheap Russian gas and relies heavily on African resources to keep lights on. If Libya stops prioritizing Europe and starts prioritizing the Sahel, lights go out in Paris and Rome. If Niger's uranium stops flowing to French nuclear plants, the French economy faces systemic failure, not recession. This is why Western media hysteria exists. They call Traoré a warlord, they call Gaddafi's sons criminals, they scream about Russian influence, they're trying to scare you into thinking this alliance is about terrorism when it's actually about geometry, about reorienting wealth flow. For 500 years, African wealth flowed north out of the continent across seas to build Western cathedrals and skyscrapers. What Traoré and the Gaddafi vision propose is changing direction, making wealth flow inward so the continent's blood circulates within the body instead of bleeding out. But there's one final piece that elevates this from regional problem to global crisis. The money. If Libya and the Sahel create this economic zone, they won't use the CFA franc controlled by France and they won't use US dollars. They have gold, they have oil, they have perfect ingredients to launch what the US financial system fears more than nuclear war, a gold-backed African currency. This was Gaddafi's unforgivable sin. He wanted to create the gold dinar, and leaked emails from 2011 confirm Western intelligence panicked, not about human rights, but about Gaddafi's plan to demand gold or real value currency for Libyan oil instead of paper dollars. That would have collapsed demand for dollars and euros. That's why he had to go. But here's the twist. They killed the man but couldn't kill the math. Today, conditions for that same financial rebellion are stronger than 2011 because now you have the Sahel alliance where Traoré controls gold mines. Libya still has oil, and the geopolitical mood has shifted. The global south is tired of dollar weaponization. The petrodollar system has kept American economy afloat for 50 years. Since the 1970s, the US made deals with oil producers. We protect you militarily, but you must sell oil exclusively in US dollars. This created permanent artificial demand for American currency. It allowed America to print trillions without causing domestic hyperinflation because those dollars were exported abroad to buy oil. We exported inflation to the rest of the world, got cheap goods, cheap oil, strong currency, while the rest of the world worked hard to get green paper we printed for free. If a unified Libya and Sahel issue trade currency backed by Burkina Faso's gold and Libya's oil, if they demand payment in this new currency or yuan or rubles, demand for US dollars vanishes overnight in a huge chunk of the world. Those trillions of dollars floating overseas come home like a tsunami. When the world no longer needs dollars to buy oil, they dump them. When that cash floods back to US economy, you get hyperinflation. Not 8% inflation, but the kind that wipes out middle classes. Gas costing $10 per gallon, 401ks losing half their purchasing power, the end of American privilege consuming more than we produce. The West knows their prosperity is built on African resources being sold cheap in Western currency. If Africa unifies, keeps resources, and dictates prices, Western living standards drop. It's zero-sum. For Africa to rise, the current Western economic model must fall. This is why rhetoric against Traoré is so violent. This is why Gaddafi bloodline return is treated as global security threat. They're not afraid of Libyan armies invading Europe. They're afraid of Libyan bankers changing currency system. The battle lines are drawn. On one side, desperate desire for sovereignty and dignity. On the other, desperate need to maintain financial hegemony. And standing in the middle, holding the match, are Ibrahim Traoré and Saif al-Islam Gaddafi. History rarely gives second chances. When nations fall, they stay fallen. When leaders are silenced, visions die with them. But what we're witnessing across burning Libyan sands and determined Sahel streets is something that defies historical laws. It's a resurrection. The United States of Africa that Muammar Gaddafi preached about is no longer just speeches. It's being forged in real time by men with nothing left to lose. But don't be naive. This story has no guaranteed happy ending. We're entering the most dangerous phase. The empire is wounded and financial systems are trembling. A wounded beast is never more dangerous than when cornered. The crosshairs once trained on Muammar are now shifting, locking onto Ibrahim Traoré, tracking movements of Gaddafi family members. The scripts for coups are being written. Assassins are being paid, sanctions are being drafted. The question hanging over the next 12 months isn't whether Africa can rise, it's will the world allow it? Will we see history repeat with Traoré meeting Thomas Sankara's fate? Will Gaddafi's sons be silenced again? Or is this time different? Has the fire spread too far to stamp out? I believe it has because there's one variable today that didn't exist in 2011. One weapon Gaddafi didn't have but Traoré does. You. The world is watching. The narrative is no longer controlled by a few Western news stations. Truth spreads on phones, in comments, in conversations like this. They can kill men, but they cannot kill an awakening. Once eyes open, they cannot be shut. Hit that subscribe button if you believe every nation has the right to breathe free. If you believe land resources belong to that land's children, if you believe the time has come for justice scales to finally balance, and drop a comment below. Let me know which city you're watching from. The old order is dying and the new world is struggling to be born.